Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Yesterday, I forgot to cover the topic of North Koreans, so we're going to do it today. Besides that, Sweden is looking for ways how to finance delivery of Gripens to Ukraine. And more importantly, we're going to cover a very difficult topic of desertions in Ukrainian military. These news and more in today's Ukraine Daily News Show. Let's begin. South Korean intelligence is reporting that North Korea, after a little bit of pause, is now preparing additional 5,000 troops to be sent to Russia. North Korea is very interested in having their military trained how to fight different type of warfare that they've used to. And they already had some troops trained during the Kursk operation, where they created a lot of issues for the Ukrainian armed forces because the political and propaganda campaigns are working very hard on the soldiers, and they are ready to die for their state. And that is always something difficult to deal with for any military, even at our modern age. So now North Koreans are sending new groups, and they will be training more soldiers, most likely in the drone warfare. We already had reports that drone warfare is what North Koreans would like to introduce next. In the meantime, the actual couple of captured North Koreans, after being imprisoned by Ukraine for some time, asked to be returned to South Korea, not North Korea, because that is the whole hypocrisy of this whole dictatorial regimes, that they are completely inhumane, and as soon as people get some freedom, they instantly realize that, oh no, I want to live in a freedom. But to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised that at some point these North Koreans, in the same way that Russians do, will start living in our nice, warm, democratic countries, while also shitting on the state of democracy and stating that we should have a stronger hands and Russia was provoked to attack Ukraine. And here is some of my personal grief, because before I fully dedicated myself to victory over Russia and supporting Ukraine, I was actually participating in help for a lot of these South Koreans and ex-North Korean organizations that try to get people out of North Korea. So the fact that there are a lot of North Koreans fighting against Ukraine right now is really making me very, very, very sad. Hackers have uncovered the Russian secrets once again. Reports are that the Informed Napalm intelligence community, together with the Phoenix Cyber Center, has published documents from the Russian company LLC Research and Design Bureau of Motor Building, located in Voronezh. The company is a key contractor of the PJSC Tupolev and one of the developers of the gearboxes and components for the Pak-Da Envoy strategic bomber and the Su-57 fighters. These were very much advertised in Russia during the 2000s. Russia claimed that these weapons have no analog in the world and that they're the best. They never really materialized. They're still like a sort of like an Armata tank kind of thing. We have some of these working some places, but they're not in absolute mass production. But more importantly, analysis of documents show that Russian production of parts for these aircrafts is completely impossible without the imported CNC machines. The company's internal audits reports that indicates that delays in the Pak-Da and the Su-57 programs are directly linked to the shortages of machine tools. Russian factories are unable to reproduce and required a level of accuracy and reliability without the foreign tools. I know it is hard for us to imagine this. We live in one of the best countries in the world, at least the most developed ones. So you can argue maybe about what is best for every person overall. But definitely one of the most developed countries in the world for sure. So for us, oftentimes it is very hard to relate how it is possible that something is not obviously accessible for businesses or factories. But the truth of the matter is, Russia is a very backwards country. They were able to get where they're at only because they were parasiting and leeching off of our needs. They were selling us cheap oil. They were paying big money to our corrupt officials, and that's how they were getting access to all of these technologies. Now, when the push came to shove and they actually need to show for it and show what they're able to do themselves, they suddenly find themselves that they're just full of holes and they cannot do anything. That is what it's crucial to follow up on sanctions. That is why our pressure on Russia can and will work if we actually do apply that pressure. And I think that this is actually showing it very well. Over 144,000 families turned to Ukraine for answers. Ukraine has received over 144,000 appeals from Russian families trying to locate soldiers missing in actions. According to Ukraine's coordination headquarters for the treatment of prisoners of war, in October alone, the project confirmed 159 Russian invaders held in captivity, including not only Russian nationals, but also citizens of Egypt, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Belarus. And in October alone, 9,243 new requests were submitted, about 300 per day. Relatives use the project's tools to confirm whether someone is dead or in captivity. Those confirmations allowed them to pressure Russian authorities to conduct exchanges, the report noted. Russians, they don't like reporting the dead. In Russia, because it's a mercenary army, we talked about it extensively, they need to pay the money for the people that are dead. And especially, it also has a problem for some of the commanders. If someone is, quote unquote, reported AWOL or missing in action, well, I mean, maybe they can find him, so there is no reason to put any kind of pressure on the commanders. Or for the Russian state, there is no reason to pay the dead man insurance to the relatives of the Russian soldiers. So everyone in Russia benefits for Russian soldiers being reported as missing in action. So the fact that there is so many requests just shows that Russian state does not really trust themselves. They don't trust their citizens. And I mean, what else did you expect? A very interesting innovation we see right over here. Right now, we know that there's something that they called waiting drones. It's drones that land on the roads and are just waiting for the vehicles to come by so they can hit them. Ukrainians, being the crafty ones that they are, they decided just to make decoys of these drones, and probably they will deliver them somewhere to the Russian backlines, because it always causes a response when these drones are found on the road. Either the cars are getting delayed, or they move around it, or something like this. So they always going to be reacting to something that is present on the road, and people are very hesitant on actually approaching and striking these drones with anything else by some other drones. Sweden and Ukraine made a deal on supply of about 150 Gripen fighter jets. Most of them jets category E, this is the newest one, but also some of the C and D variants as well, as they could be delivered a lot earlier. And right now, Sweden is looking for ways how the deliveries could be financed. It is expected that ultimately Ukrainians will be paying for these jets, but in the meantime, Sweden is considering what other options there could be done, including financing the Gripen delivery from its own budget for now. Quote, "We can look at export credits, the frozen Russian assets, and our framework for Ukraine aid, which is 40 billion crowns next year and 40 billion in 2026, Paul Jonsson, the defense minister of Sweden, said. More than that, Jonsson said that Sweden has presented the deal to the so-called coalition of the willing, the 16 European countries determined to help Ukraine win the war against Russia, and they could be willing to help fund the purchase of planes. This is a great idea, and I think that it would be definitely one of the things that should be financed from the European side. I believe things like ammunition slowly but surely need to be transitioned towards the Ukrainian side, especially production of those weapons on the Ukrainian side, because they can be produced at cheaper options and also at a larger scale rather than producing them in European Union. Whereas Europeans, we will need to focus on the things that Ukraine just cannot produce themselves. Everything is continuing deteriorating in Russia, and we get some major news. We already talked about the situation in Russia being so bad that Russian production is going downward, and especially production in the military sector that was sustaining the whole Russian economy so far. Russian tank building Uralvagonzavod announced a large-scale layoffs. Uralvagonzavod, the flagship of Russian tank industry, pretty much the only major plant that is producing tanks for Russia, has announced a large-scale reduction in staff. In some units, the number of employees may be reduced of up to 50%. According to the publication, the company planned to lay off 10% of its employees by February 2026 and completely stop recruiting new staff. Quote, according to our data, the reduction for most units is up to 50% of their staffing. As a result, able-bodied, highly qualified specialists are losing their job, Uralvagonzavod employees told the E1.ru. And the important here to note that some people might look at the number of 10% layoffs and think, wow, that's pretty low. That's not what we expect. But then you would be considering thinking about the capitalist economy. This is not how Russia is run, specifically not for their weapons industry. There are plenty of ways how weapons industries are trying to cope without laying off people, because it is mentioned in the article, once a person is laid off, then there needs to be a severance package paid to that person. And besides, there is also pressure from the government to keep people employed. So when there is a statement that there will be 10% of people laid off, that means that there's going to be significant part of workforce working instead of 5 days a week. They could be moved to 4 or even 3 days per week working schedule, most likely smaller shifts, and also will be reduction in salaries and sometimes even like postponement of payment of salaries as well. So this all is already been happening in Russia. And this is why, for example, I've been for many now years reporting that Russian economy is not doing well. Now it's just becoming absolutely obvious. So here is another proof that Putin is just a complete buffoon, as he sabotaged his own military industry during the wartime. A feat that probably some people would consider impossible. And now I want to tackle a very difficult topic of people going AWOL in the Ukrainian military. The reports are that in October, there were 21,600 cases recorded of AWOL in the Ukrainian military. Is this a big problem? Oh, absolutely. What is important is what I already said before in a video discussing the issues within Ukrainian military, is that 21,600, this includes all registered cases. And one of the reasons why people are going AWOL is to change the command structure, change the unit that they are part of. So, for example, if their commander is a complete moron, this is the way how Ukrainians are doing it. They're just going AWOL and then rejoining the military, trying to just have an option to choose which unit they will be part of. Nevertheless, it is not diminishing the seriousness of this problem for the Ukrainian side. AWOL is a big issue, arguably the biggest issue in the Ukrainian military. Now, when I talked about my case for the biggest issue is directly in Ukrainian military, and I stated that it's morons being in those command positions is exactly the reason why the AWOL number of cases is so large. In my perspective, the issue of AWOL stems from the fact that people inside of Ukrainian military feel trapped. They feel that they have no other option. And I mean, we understand that this is sort of the case. Ukraine is fighting their war for survival. What I do feel is a bigger issue is the system that was built up by the current leadership of Ukraine, which is the whole population inside of Ukraine almost don't feel war. When you arrive to Ukraine, if you ever visit, you will be stunned by the weird situation where it feels that there is like two absolutely separate societies in Ukraine right now. There is a part of society that works day in, day out just to stay motivated and support the Ukrainian armed forces and do everything that they can to make sure Ukraine wins. And those are the people that I support. Those are the people that I spend my time and effort working through. And those are the people that we want to make sure survive and live on another day. And that's where we help them on this channel. And then there is the second part of Ukrainian society that you will see whenever you travel to Ukraine, which is people that just don't give a shit. People that think that the war is something that is happening somewhere over there, that it is completely detached, and the only thing that the war is kind of bringing is an explosion from time to time, which is now more treated sort of like a natural disaster in Ukraine that is just occurring frequently, and secondly, air raid alarms. And it was truly a culture shock for me when I saw it, and it was a culture shock for a lot of other people that I know went to Ukraine as well. And this is exactly what creates this duplicity. When people on the front line are literally slaving off day in, day out, under the constant bombardments and risk to their lives. And then the other part of society that they potentially could see from their friends talking about the coffee they're drinking, or when they are going for a rotation, they're just looking at the cities and seeing how the cities are just having fun and living the cozy life. The fact of the matter is, Ukraine has not mobilized its state. Ukraine has mobilized part of its population, but the whole state is not acting like a military state. And we all know solutions to these problems. There's always just two. It's either the stick or the carrot. The fact of the matter is, if the state is not mobilized, if the stick does not apply to everyone, that people on the front line and people that try to support Ukraine, they feel separated from the rest of society, and they're questioning themselves and on saying, what I'm doing, is it actually benefiting anyone? So that's why it's important to, if you go this way, the carrot is important. And the harder and more fighting is happening on the front line, it is important that carrot keeps up there, because people need to go to the front line willingly, because this is what is demanded by the Ukrainian society. If you ever delve into Ukrainian conversations, I don't recommend it. It's sometimes it's extremely immature, as the discussion is basically just Zelensky bad, Poroshenko good, that's it. It's extremely immature sometimes, but in general, the narratives are very simple. It's like, we want an army that's going to be humane. We don't want an army like Russian, where people are literally threatened to be sent to the front lines. And I think no one really wants that. But then too much the numbers that Russia is fielding, too much the competencies and desire for Ukrainians to fight, the patriotism is a bit of wearing off. Right now, new incentives are needed. And a great example of those changes was already shown by Madjar himself. Just recently, I showed that Madjar is getting an expansion for his grouping. They were now 2% of the Ukrainian military forces, and now they will be expanding to 5%. So they will be getting at least 15,000 new people. And he stated that just in the first week, they got 5,000 new applicants. And this is an example. So Ukraine needs to do more things like these. It needs to modify their contracts. It needs to put new proposals on the table. It needs to start relieving people that have been fighting on the front line. And this is a thing that needs to be done yesterday. So in conclusion, I feel that Ukraine a little bit shot themselves in the foot with a soft-handed approach to mobilization of the nation. And so now a lot of population just doesn't feel that motivated, so to say, to be mobilized. And it would feel very, very rough if suddenly this would happen. But Ukrainians are trying to have more carrots dangling here. They are trying to apply the criticism that they received, rework the contract system, incentivize new units such as Magyar's units, new types of fighting. And for people that are considering that's like, oh, Georgie, you said all of these bad things. It will mean that Ukrainian military will collapse if this will not succeed. No, absolutely not. The main and important part is what I stated basically through this whole thing, is that there are still plenty of mechanisms that Ukraine can take to get people into trenches, so to say. So if a push comes to shove, there could be very unpopular decisions made that could lead to Ukraine getting people in the trenches. But both you and I know what those decisions are, and I don't think any of us would want to see Ukraine go down that road. So let's see how this will go along. We will see whether the number of AWOL will start reducing. This is our main metric. So far, things are pretty bad, but I'm not yet ready to say that Ukraine is completely done for. I think there's still too much breathing room here for different solutions to be applied. Thank you so much for watching. Hit subscribe if you haven't done so. It helps elevate the video to show to more people. I love you. Slava Ukraini, and I will see you next time.